I'm putting the, oh, well, we're streaming. I'll text you about it.
Okay. Oh, is it live?
A little bug says live. So aloha, everybody out there on YouTube, watching us now or later,
Whenever.
whenever. We are just about to get started this morning. And aloha kakahiaku to everybody joining us on Zoom. Thanks for joining us again. See a lot of familiar names and a few new ones. Thanks for being here. We're gonna get started with day 2 of our 10th annual first virtual Wiliwili Festival. Really excited and happy to have you all here. And I couldn't get too far into this without making a Wiliwili joke. So, welcome back. I'm Ilihia. We have the Executive Director of the Waikoloa Dry Forest Initiative, Miss Jen Lawson here. Morning,
Good
Jen.
morning. Morning.
How are you feeling this morning?
I'm excited. I had a really great day yesterday, and I'm looking forward to some of the talks today. And of course, our pauhana is usually a really fun time. So yeah, I'm feeling good. How are you feeling?
Good. You know, there's so much yesterday. I really enjoyed it. Couldn't peel myself away from the festival all day, which is a good thing because I was hosting. But it was really good stuff, you know, from Wild's Pihanui Bronner and his opening in the preserve, along with some of the founding members of the initiative, um, to welcoming you and talking story about your work with the initiative and the preserve. You know, bringing on brother Rob, that is always a fun time. He has such a great way of taking the complex, making it simple, and making it fun and accessible. Um, Ku'ule, Kihalani, of course, Koma'aina of Kekahavai Ole, and just sharing her mo'olelo of place that helps us connect to certainly the Waikoloa Dry Forest Preserve, but wherever we are, helping us connect in that way. Down south with Jody and Keone down in Ka'u and their important work to protect that aina. Um, you know, you and Jackie had your flower activity. Yeah.
That's always super fun for us. We've been doing virtual flower lab and field trips in the forest all school year with kids, fourth graders and now fifth and third graders as well. So that's always a fun thing for us to get to team up and teach about plants.
Now the fourth and fifth graders you talked about, are those the future foresters?
Future foresters are actually coming in person, and then some of them are joining in on our virtual field trips. But we're actually teaching the entire class at Waikoloa Elementary. So we have all of the teachers there and students on board every week to do what we can to get these kids outside, even if it's virtually. But we did have some
Awesome.
future foresters in the preserve yesterday. Some of our forest leaders are going to be there today, helping out, volunteering, because there's this whole other side of things happening out there physically in the preserve. And it probably won't surprise you or anybody that knows me, but after this sessions yesterday, I decided to go out to the preserve and check out what was happening there. And we had a lot of visitors, and people were having a really good time and just excited to have the opportunity to go hike and learn in the forest. So, that's what this is also all about, is experiencing nature and meeting the Wiliwili trees. So really happy that people took advantage of that opportunity yesterday, and really grateful to all of our volunteers and staff that are out there doing, all of the organizational stuff that needs to happen to allow visitors to come to the preserve.
Awesome. Yeah. You know, it takes a village. It really does. And the Waikoloa Dry Forest Initiative, in addition to the staff and the awesome volunteers and all the people who just contribute their mana'o and their good thoughts and their good intentions to the project, we're also super fortunate to have supporters who share their resources so that we can continue this work. Folks like Waikoloa Plaza, and we talked story with Colin and Sam yesterday about the Wiliwili tree that they were able to relocate and is now going to be a centerpiece of the plaza. So everybody can come in and greet that tree as they enter. You know, and they shared that story of how what could have been a sad thing, having to remove a tree, and turned it into a happy thing. So more people can learn about these amazing, magnificent trees.
Yeah, we're excited to see that tree living on, and how cool that the community even notices that a tree is being removed in town and has a vested interest in what becomes of it. So we're really excited that they took that opportunity to highlight and honor that tree.
Absolutely. And Waikoloa Plaza, just one of the great sponsors who has supported this festival, as well as the ongoing work of the Waikoloa Dry Forest Initiative. We also want to mahalo Hawaii Forest and Trail, Hawaii Water Service, the Waikoloa Foundation, Hawaiian Ethos, Hilton Waikoloa Village, Forest Solutions, First Hawaiian Bank, and NG Hawaii, all members of the Waikoloa community working together to really malama this place that's so special to so many of us. Jen, how's the silent auction going?
The silent auction is going well. I can see that there's a few bidding wars happening online. So we're going to be closing that up this evening at 6. So you can check out the silent auction through the Huva app. It's online, but we're also going to have an in-person silent auction today up at our thrift shop, the Dusty Donkey Emporium. So our thrift shop's open every Saturday from 9 to 1. And the shop will be open today, but we're also going to be hosting a silent auction there. And our amazing volunteers and donors and helpers at the thrift shop have put together a huge silent auction with all kinds of fun things there. So you can actually go up there, check it out, and bid at the auction. And one of the reasons we really want the auction to do well is that we have an anonymous donor who has pledged to match everything that we raise in both our online and in-person silent auction today.
Wow.
So yeah, that's a huge donation and a big help. And as you're deciding whether or not to raise your bid, keep that in mind. It's definitely helping us raise real money for our mission to do the restoration and education work that we do.
Oh, that's amazing. And there's some really cool stuff on the silent auction. But first, can you remind people where the Dusty Donkey Emporium is?
Sure. It's at the Waikoloa Stables, which is usually where the Wiliwili Festival is. So just Mauka of the village, of Waikoloa Village, you'll see a big sign out there that says thrift shop open, and you'll find it there.
Outstanding. And if you can't make it there today, there's certainly lots to bid online. We got artwork by a bunch of amazing artists, very generous artists who donated their work. We got lots of plants. We have plants from the Dry Forest Initiative Nursery as well as Keoho Nursery. Very thankful to have those. There's lots of great stuff from Tommy Bahama, Juice Bar 101, Merriman's, Mahina, Pau Pizza and Provisions, Soha Living, Starbucks, Hawaii Nautical. There's activities, Body Glove Cruises, Waikoloa Beach Golf Course, and perhaps one of my favorite activities, Big Island Brew House. Check them out.
And Big Island Brew House is going to be representing tonight at the Pauhana as well. So those guys are our good friends. Thank them and enjoy Brew House tonight.
Oh, they're amazing. Can you tell us about the Pauhana tonight? The concert?
Sure, yeah. We usually, last year actually was the first year that we hosted a band after the Wiliwili Festival and had a little beer and wine garden to kind of celebrate the end of the day. And so we decided that we wanted to do that again this year, and we're hosting it in the preserve. So it'll be a smaller event. We're outdoors. We're actually sold out, so that's excellent. And we're going to be having some live music with some of our friends, Mr. Peanut Butter and Ocean Grown. So both Waimea bands that are good friends of the Dry Forest. And again, drinks and music and Wiliwili trees.
Well, that sounds great. You know, I really enjoyed last year, and there was another event uh several months ago that it was one of the first, you know, in-person events that I was able to go to since COVID started. And you know, it was a fundraiser for the Dry Forest Initiative, a very socially distanced, very well put together, magical evening, preserve tour, and then dinner, prepared by some chefs with a lot of aloha for the forest. And, you know, it was all very safely done. And, you know, that dinner actually sparked a lot of conversation about how we, you know, sort of get back to doing these things safely. So Jen, how was that for you, that dinner?
It was really good. And we were, we do small events, and events fundraising is really important for a small nonprofit, or at least for us it is. And we're also just really accustomed to having, sharing the place with people. So for us, it was this idea like maybe we can make this happen. These things that we're all missing, getting together, having food, being, in these places. And it was amazing. The chefs were all, you know, not able to do their work. They haven't been cooking at the resorts or at restaurants that had to temporarily close. So, for them, it was kind of an outlet to do their thing, to create food and to bring people together. And it ended up being a great time and a great fundraiser for us. And it kind of showed us that we can do this. We can have these events if we do them mindfully, and we, keep everybody's safety in mind. We can still enjoy each other's company, food and drinks. And we're so lucky to have this amazing venue that's outdoors. And, we get people into the forest to learn about place and also to just enjoy being there. You don't always have to work when you come into the forest. Sometimes you can just be there and enjoy it with your friends and family. And we're trying to do that here and there as we can. And we're looking forward to another fun event tonight.
Awesome. I really wish I could be there, but like you said, sold out. So next year, jump on it early, guys. We have an amazing, amazing person. Um, Other than Jen, because you're amazing too.
I
But
am
we
really
haven't.
looking forward to listening to Auntie Hannah, and I'm so honored that she's here to talk to us today. So yes, amazing.
Definitely. We're looking forward to her. Before I introduce her, which is an honor for me to do so, I do also want to remind everybody that we have our exhibit hall, our virtual exhibit hall on Huva. We have folks representing all sectors from the ocean, if we Aloha Kiholo, the South Kohala Coastal Partnership Marine Mammal Center, all the way out Mauka, Waikoloa Village Association Fire Management Action Committee, Waikoloa Plaza, certainly our Dry Forest Initiative, the Future Foresters, the Division of Forestry and Wildlife, Hawaii Pacific Parks, which helps to steward our national parks, which is a lot of our natural and cultural treasures on this island are under the stewardship of the National Park Service, Hawaii State Parks, Hawaii Wildlife Center, Hawaii Ulu Co-op. We're going to have a cooking demo from them to close out our sessions today. Lots of great exhibitors. Please take the time to go check them out. They'll be around all day, so in between sessions, but not right now, because I have the distinct honor and pleasure of introducing our next guest, Hannah Kihalani Springer. She's going to talk through her life in the Kaha lands. So journey through time, through the kinds of changes in lifestyles and occupations that have happened through those times. Hannah lives with 3 generations of her ohana at Kukui Ohiwai, at Ka'upulehu, in a home they have lived in since 1920. From Kukui Ohiwai, they look to the shorelines of Kukio and Ka'upulehu, where her mother's people and her father's people lived respectively, in the generation of Kamehameha's rise and Captain Cook's arrival. And over time, we find our lives so portable today. Yeah? So imagine this, over time, this ohana has remained in a 5-mile radius and has watched the landscape evolve through the generations. I've been looking forward to this for a very long time. It's an honor and a pleasure to welcome you, Kihalani.
Aloha mai nei, aloha mai kako. Ooh, kanani ke ala. What a beautiful day we have in Hawaii nei, yeah? We're so
Oh yeah.
lucky. I look forward to our dialogue. So maybe we can just start with where the kahalands are, because not everybody might know. So is that a good place to begin?
Ai, ke olu olu.
Hey, hiki no. The kahalands are that part of North Kona, from Honokohauiki in the south through Pu'uanahulu in the north. There are 24 plus ahupua'a within this landscape, but it includes the northwest rift of Hualalai. So they truly are the lava lands of Kona. They do continue on, of course, up and through the dry forest and the cloud forest. And the summit of Hualalai is in our home ahupua'a of Ka'upulehu. Throughout our time together, we'll be talking a little bit about the different places that we visited and the people that we go to see them. But imagine, if you can, the Keahole Airport. The Keahole Airport sits on the lava delta created by the last eruption of Hualalai in 1801. When a vent opened in the uplands of Hu'ehue and flowed in a narrow stream before opening up to create the lava delta that the airport sits on now. Beneath that airport landscape once was the fish pond called Pa'aiea. The Hawaiian language newspapers describe the Pa'aiea as being 3 miles long and 1 mile wide. And hyperbole may be a traditional and customary practice, but what it does is, what is this now? 220 years later, we're still talking about this large fish pond that once was where the Keahole Airport is now. So imagine being at the Keahole Airport and looking upslope of Hualalai and all of the pu'u that you see. The pu'u punctuate the landscape and the lives of the generations of the people that have lived there. The oldest hills, the ones closest to the sea at Ku'ili, between Makalavena and Maninio Valley, are over 10,000 years old. The youngest, Puhiapele, we have just heard is 220 years old. Now, Puhiapele was the last eruptive event, but in 1929, our family was evacuated from Kukui Ohivai when magma, which is the word for lava before it sees the light of day, came close enough to the surface of the earth that blue hot gas and fissures to release the gas opened up on the lands of Hu'ehue. At Pu'uva'awa'a, the Ola'i, the earthquakes, caused people to move out of their homes, us too, and into tents. Finally, we moved to South Kona to live with our ohana in that section of Kona, because the violence of the earthquakes and the possibility of becoming isolated and the possibility of being consumed by the pele was so great that we left for a little bit of time. But that's a sketch of the kahalands. So from Pu'uanahulu in the north to Honokohauiki in the south, we have a variety of national park, state park, very high-end subdivisions. We have Kiholo, and we've talked a lot about and with the folks from Hui Aloha Kiholo, but this is the Aina Kaha. there are Ainakaha on all of the lands. They're the leeward, on all of the islands. They're the leeward side of the islands. Here, we further describe our Ainakaha as Kekaha vai oleia. Kekaha the place, vai water, and ole without. So there has been historically a limited carrying capacity of humanity on these lands. So we might talk about that a little bit more. We continue to live on catchment water. Well, we all live on catchment water, whether or not we acknowledge it or recognize it. We just happen to have 5 water tanks out back that remind us that we have a limited amount of water to conduct our domestic and agricultural needs. But I'm like the Energizer Buddy. You just kind of point me and I'll start, banging my cymbals and walking on. So let me catch my breath. And do you have any questions?
Sure. I had one, and then now I have another one. So you mentioned that we all live on catchment, and that's, that's a big thing to remember. My catchment happens to be at the other end of, a few miles of pipes, and the folks who malama that catchment send me a bill every other month, but nonetheless, it's still a catchment. And so that growing up in Puna, we had catchment, right? So it brings you this really acute awareness of how much water get, and when you use them, no more.
Oi, hoi.
The other thing I wanted to kind of revisit too was you mentioned that the flow that took Pa'aiea and formed that delta that upon which now Keohole Airport sits. 1801 is not that long ago. Like in the grand scheme of it's not that long ago. It's fascinating to think how, I feel like on this island, we are on different understanding of permanence.
Hoi, hoi. Truly, and just if we think of it in terms of the United States of America, still was bebe. 1801 was still in swaddling clothes, that nation. And of course, in Hawaii nei, Kamehameha was on his rise, So he wasn't the paramount chief of the Paiaina Apau yet, but he was on his rise up. So when the pond of Pa'aiea was filled in, he was able to marshal his civic resources to go down to Kiholo to build the pond that was described by the visiting English missionary, William Ellis, as being 600 acres underwater. Now, a square mile is 640 acres. And of course, we know the Brits aren't hyperbolic. It's not their traditional and customary practice, so it really must have been 600 acres underwater at Kiholo. In 1859, Mauna Loa flow consumed that fish pond. And for whatever reasons, no ponds were built anew in the Kaha lands. Although to the southern end of our Ainakaha, at Koloko and Honokohau, the ponds there, the one at Koloko being another Kuapa, a pond separated from the ocean by the Kuapa, the seawall, and Aimakapa at Honokohau, a pond of the separated from the ocean by a berm of lava and sand, were both maintained well into the 20th century. So, permanence, as you say, is relative. I guess it's a state of being, because in that time that we described the family being here, and other families as well, Uanani o Kahaiolelo o Ku'ule, Inehinei, so brilliant, Alohine. But we remain. We've seen Ali'i rise and fall. We've seen an island nation born and die before its time. We've seen political parties wax and wane, elected and appointed officials come and go, occupations change, but we remain. And there is the continuity. There is the permanence. And it really is something a little bit different than we popularly think of. Mahalo. I love your apprehension, your comprehension about us all living on catchment. Because how many times do people like patiently explain to me, oh no, Auntie, we have county water. And it's like, oh no, 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 no.
It's
So
a
we all do live
big
on
catchment.
that. So we all malama. Yeah, we should all be conscientious about our means, living within our means, and what is the carrying capacity of the place that we are asking to carry the weight of our lives. As you and Jen were talking about the event the other evening, I smiled in my na'au because back in the day, if you were out on the lava land and socializing, the nature of the lava lands imposed low numbers on those events. If you had to ride horse from Pu'uva'ava'a, the cone, to Kiholo, if you were in the uplands of Hu'ehue heading to Kuki'o or to Makalavena, they didn't have coolers, so you were limited by what your skills could hunt on the way or catch when you got there or carry on your animals when you went down. So the COVID is kind of imposing on us similarly, for safety's sake, us to look at where can we find contentment with each other? Can we find it in an intimate gathering under the stars on the lava lands and just let the spirit of the lava lands be there with us? And it can take on a little greater identity when we're in a smaller group. So that made me smile. I bet it was a lovely evening. I have been to one and enjoyed it very much.
Interesting how the lava land does that, yeah?
Keeps you honest. You know, when I was little,
Absolutely.
my folks could just let me go kihele, just go. And if I got hurt, they knew it was because I was being inattentive, not because of a bad actor or the cars on the Kahumanu highway were going, I crossed when I shouldn't have. Mind you, I'm 68. So Kahumanu Highway never came in until I was 23 in 1975. So in my young days, getting up and down the Mauna, Hualalai, was ride horse, walk feet, and a relic of World War II were all the World War II Jeeps that our grandparents and parents used to have. And that was the first time that we went up and down Hualalai in a mechanized fashion. Now, my husband, in his younger, fitter days as a county firefighter, used to walk down from our home Kukuyohivai on the upper highway at 2,000 feet in elevation to meet his fire brothers on Kahumanu Highway. And it took him less than an hour to do that jaunt on the Kiholo Hu'ehue Trail. So you can imagine the old folks, the people of old, fit from walking on our Aina Pele, up and down, back and forth across. And really, you know, Mauna Loa, so long that Mauna. Mauna Kea, so tall that Mauna. Hualalai is relatively easy to get up and down and back and forth across. It's doable within even within the abilities of us folks today. Of course, I'm talking 40 years and 60 pounds ago, but, you know, oia hoi.
Oya no. You, I've often been fascinated and, you know, driving back and forth. I live in Kona now and driving back and forth to Hilo. I've often passed that sign on the highway, Kukui Ohivai, and, you know, kind of wondered about that name. Could you share a little bit about that inoa and some of the characteristics of that place?
Ay, mahalo. Mahalo na kaninao. Kukui Ohivai was apparently an ancient kukui grove that was in this vicinity. So from Huehue, perhaps as far as the scenic lookout near the 28-mile marker. And I say perhaps that because even at Kaho'olamakana'a, they find deposits of kukui there, which would seem to indicate the presence of those plants there previously. And, you know, maybe I'm being a good traditional and customary practitioner and being a little bit hyperbolic, but nunui ke ulula au kukui. But we know that there are kukui in these places, and unlike the east side of this island and so many other wet places on the other islands of our Pai'aina, kukui didn't naturalize as easily here in the Aina Kaha. If you find kukui trees, surely some kupuna in the Wamamau in the distant past planted the starters that came to be the population that we're looking at. So this place name comes to us indeed from the Wamamau. And you know, for a long time, I didn't have a mo'olelo that substantiated the use of this name, Kukui Ohivai. So many of our esteemed kupuna would correct me and say, Kukui Uhivai, and we talk about the Uhivai, and indeed how important those mists, those low clouds that come and sit on the land are to our water budget. Dewfall is an important part of how long a wet season can extend into a dry time. So we aloha nui, whether it's the dew or the mist or the low clouds, but this name remains Kukui Ohivai, and it's recorded in our family journals and books. And then a friend gave to me an excerpt from a Hawaiian language newspaper. And I'm sorry I don't have the citation. It was one of the things. I was so impressed that Kule had Fornander right at the ready, and I meant to have I kuno to her because I should have my reference here now. But it's a reference to the time of Pe'a, when they would gather at Kukui o Ohivai because of the pleasant nature of that place. Now, the only thing that is unpleasant about Kukui Ohivai is when it's a dry season and things dry quickly here, because our soil horizon, I don't know if you can see, put it against my shirt perhaps, our soil horizon is about 3 inches thick. Maybe I'm being exaggerating again, but it's really shallow. We have to build our soil with aggressively mulching, and it works beautifully. We found kukui leaf tips, mamake, even wauke, which we have naturalized here at Kukui Ohivai, and the native yellow hibiscus, the ma'ohauhele, all make wonderful mulch, and the taro respond immediately to the application of that mulch. A friend suggested that those are like just nutrient, even sugar-rich mulch that the taro responds to. It's astounding, but perhaps I digress. Although these are characteristics of Kukui Ohivai. So during the ranching years, and with that eruption of Puhiapele, just below of us at about 1,300 feet in elevation, so 700-foot elevation change, but Hualalai is so steep that it's really not that far away. But with the eruption and then the introduction of the ungulates, the kukui and other vegetation retreated. Now, when I talk about the ungulates, our family we're a ranching family. We presently raise sheep. My husband raises sheep here at Kukuyohivai. My family were ranchers at Huehue. And before that, we were goat herders out on the lower lava lands. So, when we talk about occupations, we've gone from fishermen and gardeners to goat herders and cattle ranchers, and we change with the times. But we remain here at Kukuyohivai. And we do have kukui, not a closed canopy of kukui. But here's a story. One day in the early 80s, I was washing dishes, looking out the back window up to the mauna, when I heard it sounded like a helicopter or a jet, or a helicopter and a jet from Waikoloa were like going slow and low across our pasture. But it was a tornado. And this tornado, not a dust devil. This tornado bounced across our property, north to south. Then it turned right and went Maukamakai and bounced down to Puhiapele. Then it turned left and bounced up on an angle towards Huehue. And then it turned left and bounced down to Palani Junction. You could follow the path of the fallen trees in the wake of this event. And then, several months later, had all the same age kukui sprang up. So the nuts were waiting in the ground for something to release them from the stranglehold of the guava and the Christmas berry and the silver oak. And once released, they sprang up. So, of course, they still had to compete with those other more aggressive introduced species, and a dry time settled on the land. And they did not survive in the numbers that first blush of growth indicated that they might, but there still are perhaps more there than there were prior to the time that the tornado swept through the Kaha lands.
Kupanaha.
Hey.
We talked with Rob Yagi, the preserve manager in Waikoloa, yesterday about just some of the brilliant characteristics of the Wiliwili seed and its ability to kind of hunker down and wait for that vakupono, and when the conditions are right, then to sprout forth. And it sounds like something similar happened here, where the kukui was able to just kind of bide its time, and then when had the opportunity, just to flourish.
Polole, truly. You might notice that I'm wearing a Wiliwili t-shirt from 2005. This is the first year of the Run for the Dry Forest. And the Wiliwili was their inaugural icon. So I wear it in honor of both the Run for the Dry Forest and our festival today. Can I talk a little stories about Wiliwili?
Please.
Aye. So, chronological order. Okay. Below of our home, to the north of Puhiapele, was once the most handsome Wiliwili tree that I have ever known. Imagine, if you can, the finish of the Liuokalani canoe race, men's division. Imagine those strapping young men, never more beautiful, glistening in the afternoon sun, resplendent in their beauty. Brah, that's what this tree was like. If you could have a crush on a tree, I would have had a crush on this Wiliwili tree. It rose out of the fountain grass and lantana, but it had a lama and walahe'e and iliahi and even some hame and olopua and halapepe, companions around it. Surely when it grew up, the natives were the dominant species. If the United States was a bebe in 1801, this tree was a strapping 20-year-old when I came to know it. And I would take my morning walk and I would enjoy it. And it was a beautiful thing to see. Then one day I went for a morning walk and there was a vacancy in my reality. Waha'ule, this Wiliwili tree was tens of feet tall, and it was not gnarled like the Wiliwili that Ku'ule shared with us yesterday. It was straight and robust. But ha'ule, insect damage had infested it. There had been a wind. It fell over. We called the land agent. Kamehameha Schools owns the property. We talked to their people and received permission to salvage this Wiliwili trunk. Now, my ecologist friends, Lenny Stemmerman, a person long gone, but a name which should ring in the annals of Pacific Island and in particular Hawaii Island botany. And I spoke about this, and she was saying, well, if the landscape wasn't covered with fountain grass and lantana, she would encourage me to not ask to salvage the wood, but to let it deteriorate there and feed its companions and any young seedlings that might be able to spring up. But since it was covered with fountain grass and lantana, she took no exception to us asking permission to salvage it. So we did. We made it available to one of the local canoe clubs, Lili'uokalani Canoe Club at the time. They no longer paddle, but they were able to get ama for 4 canoes out of that one trunk. 2 of them were just like, whoa, top and bottom, and the other 2 were laminated, spliced and laminated. That was the size of this most beautiful of Wiliwili tree. And that we were able to salvage it and put it to good use is pleasing to our sensibility, yeah? To our Ike Hawaii, to our Ike Kupuna, to have known the splendor of this life, and then to bring to life those canoes that got to paddle the Kona seas because of it. Second story. There was once in Puna, before the eruption came to Waha'ula, there was once a lava crack across that landscape, and the park had made a pathway down into the lava crack and out of it, and inside of that lava crack was the second most handsome Wiliwili tree I have ever known. And I kuno to Puna to have produced this wonderful child of it. And we were walking there one day, and there were some seeds on the ground, and eye-catching, perhaps, as Rob talked about yesterday. So I picked them up and put them in my pocket, and I spread them out on a houseplant for decorative measure when they started sprouting. And so I put them, made 4 seedlings of them, and one of them sits behind our house now here at Kukuyohiwai in Kona. And so hei noa no Puna for this tree. But last year, our daughter-in-law and I had the distinct pleasure of being out in the afternoon, working in the mala and hearing amakihi. Now, it's not unusual to hear amakihi here at Kukuyohiwai, but soon the song of one amakihi in this Wiliwili tree was joined by another. And then those 2 were joined by 2 more. And then pretty soon, there were about 10 amakihi flitting from branch to branch and chattering. And we just took silence and stayed beneath the Wiliwili tree, enjoying this singular experience that's so rooted in this place. But I imagine not many of us get to enjoy anymore. Hoo, kukanani. Wow.
I love that. I love both stories. The first one was interesting where you started and where you ended. You know, with our Mo'olelo Hawaii, I love how we always kind of loop back. So you're a glistening paddler at the end of the race ended up glistening at the end of the race after all.
Ay.
Nani.
Nani no. You know,
Oh, go ahead, Kalamai.
I was just going to say that, you know, when I mentioned the companions of that Wiliwili tree, and it's not only here in Ka'upulehu. As you're going to Kailua and you go to the lands of Kealakehe and Keahuolu, below Liliuokalani Gardens, going into Kailua, there used to be Wiliwili tree there. There still are Alahe'e and Mamane and even the Nayo. If you go down to Kuanaiki, if you go to the surf park and walk about there, you'll find some of the Nayo that did survive the thrip infestation and seems to be robust still. So I'm sorry I don't have any pictures. I didn't quite make it into the 21st century. I have a slide carousel,
Oh,
but I don't have a PowerPoint. Sorry. But as we grow familiar through events such as this with the native flora, and we can see it out in the wild, I think that is a good thing for us. It's good to see it in the wild. I know that there are measures to have a certain percentage of plantings in developments be native species, but I don't know. I look at those guys and I don't know how much the natives like to be in a cement bordered garden, you know. Like down at Kuanaiki, when you walk along the shoreline path, and the plants are basically where they've been for generations, they have a different vibe to them than the ones that are grown as ornamentals. And if you're going to grow an ornamental, I don't really take offense to growing natives, but I think that we should spend as much attention on preserving natural places where the natives can survive fully and freely, like at the Waikoloa project and the Ku'upulehu project and the Pu'uwa'awa'a project and all the projects galore, even down to the kohalas.
and that's a beautiful segue into you know, another mana'o, that it's not just about the tree, it's not just about the grass, it's not just about the plant, it's that whole, you know, you talked about your tree that grew and then the amakihi came, right? And there's that olelo no eao that a lot of folks hear, that hahai kaua I kaulula'ao, that the rain follows the forest, but really it's more than just the rain. It's this whole kind of the birds and the bees and namea apau.
Aye. Namea apau, you know, and I misspoke for a moment there and I talked about the native fauna, but let's not forget the pueo and the io that are large and fly above us, but all those bugs that I don't even begin to know. And in context, you know, we are not humanity is not apart from nature, it's a part of nature. And when we have campaigns to save this or to save that species, sometimes it seems it's an exercise in human vanity rather than expression of love for a family member. So, you know, when we describe ourselves as kama'ainas, children of the land, it's not a metaphor. It's we actually are the children of this place that provides the food, that provides the air, that provides the water, that provides support for the weight of our lives. So the closer we can get to it and to nature and to be in the shade of ancient trees, you know, when we go out to Ho'olamakana'a, we're in the shade of trees that are truly ancient. We don't have to write a check to some hui that is doing wonderful work, but on some continent far, far away. There's wonderful work being done here by that litany of names that we're going through and looking at during the course of the Wiliwili Festival that are doing work to preserve individuals and, more importantly, communities that have been here for time immemorial. Certainly before our time frame. The one of those is the lama, which is known to be a slow growing tree, and being here at Kukuyo Hivai, we always knew the ohia. There's some beautiful, even lehua mamo, even the yellow lehua that grow in the mixed forest, the silver oak ohia forest lands below of us. But somehow the lama was just kind of in the background of my mind. But I was living in Hilo. I was going to UH Hilo. I was in remedial hula with halau kekuhi, and all of a sudden, one season when the lama was in fruit, it just popped for me. And I saw it and I realized how much of it was there. And I remembered the old folks talking about the e lama, as we call it here. And I was just filled with that whole piha of knowledge and understanding, and seeing something that the old folks had seen so much of. Now, sidebar, I knew the kokio. I knew the uhi-uhi, because those were my grandmother, and through her, my mother's favorite plants. So to go and have a picnic under a kokio or an uhi-uhi was time that we held dear. To sow a lei of the halapepe was something I remembered hearing about, but only recently accomplished several years ago. So the lama came into view and was there close with halau. And then I moved home to Kona. Time passed, and I was no longer associated with those folks on a regular basis. But similar to the story of the Wiliwili tree, in 1993, there was a great storm on Hualalai. And same thing, I went for a morning walk. This is after the Wiliwili story. Went for a morning walk and found a lama tree that had blown over. And this, like that Wiliwili, indicating that it grew up in a time when its companions were close around it, was straight and tall and true. So again, we got permission from the land agent and received permission to harvest it, to salvage it. And I gave it as a makana aloha to halau kekuhi, and I believe that lama still stands on their ku'ahuhula until today. So a nice joining of the west side and the east side, and the way that exchanges take place among folks of practice. And even when we are not actively engaged with one another at the same time, in the same place, we know and remember one another. And when the opportunity arises, we're able to share these things from one place to the other. So I love that, as with the Wiliwili, this kind of tragic event, because they were both beautiful specimens, but we were able to apply them in a totally traditional and consistent way, even into the 20th century, because it was in the last century.
Oh, absolutely. And just one quick note, you mentioned you were in the remedial class of Halau Kekuhi.
Yeah.
For the folks watching this who are not familiar with Halau Kekuhi, the levels of difficulty of dances are measured on a scale lovingly referred to as kawele, or towels. As in, the more difficult dances, you're going to sweat through 7 or 8 or 9 towels through the course of the dance. So even remedial halau kekuhi is some very, very deep, challenging, intense dance that really connects to nature. And so I'm wondering if you could go into that a little bit more, how that lama ended up on the kuahu, but what does that mean, and what are some of the ways that in this festival we talk so much about the natural connections between these trees and their hoa around them, but to the spiritual side of things, what are some of those connections?
Yeah, there's a hierarchy inside of halal, and a meritocracy. How many towels you and use on that dance? There was a time when many people would clamor to halal to seek identity for themselves. And in their association with halal, and not kuhi necessarily, but finding a place in the 20th and the 21st century that was different from the norm. And being in halal was something distinctive and something which was an accomplishment. And we can watch the kumu give so much, and there's an identity exchange there. For us, and it was Merry Monarch Week that I took the lama log and left it in Kumu's garage with some of the pua malihini of Kukuyohivai, the freesias, the sweetly scented Chinese lily, which Kumu would know that came from me, and left it there. And it was an act of giving, an act of service, an act of ma'alamaia la ko, na kumu. And whether it's na kumu or keakua manaloa or na kuakini lau or each other, ikekahi, that notice, that practice rather, of being with one another in service to, but also with one another, whether it's aloha, whether it's ma'alama, whether it's lokomaikai, any of those verbs that we can turn into a collective experience, enhances, expands, and magnifies those states of, given the stage of my life and my disposition, I'm going to say grace. So we have the grace to be with one another in service to, but also with one another. So when we can ma'alama aina, when we can ma'alama ikekahi, that ma'alama has a chance to huvale, yeah? It can grow, it can, maybe even can overflow the calabash. And this is important because aside from the ecological value and benefit, I think one of the greatest accomplishments of events such as this weekend, or when the dry forest partners get together for hui days with one another, or a woman and her daughter-in-law sit under a wiliwili tree and listen to the amakihi chirp there. These are wonderful opportunities for good mental health. And I think there are so many distractions, so many reasons for disillusionment, dismay, dis-ease going on in the world around us today, that when we can take a step into grace with one another, ma'alama keakua, we can better ma'alama the aina and each other. We're just in better place. Ma'alama the lama. Because that's where we began, yeah, with that lama tree that fell in Ka'upulehu and lives with halal on the east side now.
Ma'alama lama ho'i.
Hey.
It's certainly one of the things I really appreciate about Olelo Hawaii is how it's so complex, but it's so simple, right? And there's these things like, ma'alama to take care of, ma'alama lama, brilliance, and you find them in the lama tree. And it's all right there if you know to look for it.
And if you could see that that log that is on the kuahu, when I left it, it had the bark was intact. And you know, as the primary resources describe this uncarved block of lama that sits on the kuahu hula. I've only been back to Hala once, and after this, and it was when they installed the log on the kuahu hula, and it wasn't carved, but some many hands had lomied that lama, so it did lama, like the illuminated texts of the ancient Bibles. It was, you know, someone once said that, well, he who dies with the best, with the most memories wins. Bruh, I feel like a winner.
Oh,
So grateful for the opportunity to see the lama from its standing state to standing on the kuahu hula. Mahalo.
Oh yeah. I was just looking to see if I could find a picture of that kuahu, but it's intentionally kind of obscured, I think, in the Halawa Kikuhi was featured in part of one of these videos in a series produced by Hawaii Tourism called Hawaii Rooted. Followed the journey of a chef who traces a lot of his connection back to his time at Halau. So he's in part of the video, he offers a lei to the kuahu, but it's intentionally not can really see.
I think Hola Mai Pele, if you look at the PBS video, somewhere over someone's shoulder.
Ah.
But you're right. I mean, it was very brief. It was just, was that it?
Well, that can be homework for everybody. Yeah. Watch Hawaii Rooted, go watch Hola Mai Pele. Good stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's, you know, we could go so deep and we could go so far, and, you know, there's so much we could cover, but was there anything you wanted to talk about we haven't hit yet?
Yeah, a couple things.
Sure.
The Aiea. We mentioned that place name, Pa Aiea. So the Aiea is a native member of the Nothocestrum family. It's found here in Ka'upulehu and Pu'uva'ava'a. And so after my eyes perceived the fruit of the lama, and I got to just have another little sidebar here. The cowboys of Hu'ehu'e Ranch. So I'm speaking of, in particular, members of the Haleama'u and the Mahi families, talked about liking to go hunting when the lama was in fruit, because lama is a native member of the persimmon family. And when the lama was in fruit, they didn't have to pack so much food, because if you get a tree ripened lama from the Kaha lands, it's kind of like that mulch I was talking about. It's sweet, it's dense, it fills you well. Now, we're junior scientists here at Kukui'o Hiwai, so we tried getting some of this nice sun-ripened lama and make a lama and peanut butter sandwich. Now, you know, don't chuckle, because it's, you know, 20th century people, us, and it was really quite good. So
that sounds ono.
It was ono. So my eyes now are perceiving the lama. I've heard the stories from the old folks that used to ride horse with, used to hunt out on the lava. Well, you know, it's kind of like remedial hula. It was like remedial hunting. You know, I had my BB gun and they would say, go over there. And then they'd break right and go and harvest the animals. But my husband and I were strolling through this mixed forest that we've talked about across the street from our house, when this fragrance, you know, reminiscent of pakalana, sense catching the way that Pakalana is, but it wasn't quite Pakalana, but it was so pleasing. And one of the things about the flora of the dry forest is often the flowers are small and inconspicuous. And even when there is a scent, you need to be quite close up to the plant. Of course, to get the scent, of course, the Nayo and the Walahe'e are exceptions to that. And this plant that we followed our noses to, and we didn't know what it was, but we harvested it, took a little sample from it. And we were living in Volcano on Kilauea at the time. And our friend Lenny Stemmerman, we happened to meet her in the parking lot of the store where we got back to Volcano. We had the sample and we asked her what it was, and she introduced us to the Aiea. So this fragrance, I just wanted to introduce that element of sensation to our conversation, that the scent of the Aiea brought us to it. Here, hard to imagine, but our friend Lenny, I had our first child and I was here at Kukuyohiwai, and she came to visit me, but she knew of a certain lava crack tube fissure below of our house. And she went there and she brought me 2, 3 strands about this long of the most rare, the maile lau li'i nui loa poquito mas maile ever. Now, I say more rare. Now, there's a very special maile that grows at Pu'uanahulu, but there are multiple plants of it. This was the last one that we know of here in Ka'upulehu, and we had that sample. So there's so much that we don't know still to be learned about out on the lava. Even if you go into the lava tubes below of here, you'll see deposits of some sort of salty substance. I don't know that it's sodium chloride. I'm not a chemist. I don't play one on TV, but there are salty deposits on the walls of the lava tubes below of our house. And a friend who worked for Hawaii Forest and Trail, who you've mentioned as one of the sponsors here, said that she had once taken some spelunkers, some guys who look at caves, into the lava, one of the lava tubes here. And when they saw these deposits, they said they would not be comfortable drinking the water beneath because of these deposits. Well, a great to-do is made about the infrared technology that allows us to see the water moving off of the island and out into the ocean. And we have the technical ability to drill holes into the ground and suck the water out of the aquifers beneath. But just because we have an understanding of presence, and just because we have a mechanical capability to draw the water up from the aquifers, doesn't mean that the quality of water is what we think it's going to be. People who live in some of the most expensive real estate on the planet, at the subdivisions, at Lower Ka'upulehu and Lower Kuki'o, have their water treated by reverse osmosis filtration before it comes into their systems, water systems, because of the deposits of these salts of whatever kind that they are that gunk up the water works. So if we think it's too good to be true, that there's all this water rushing off the island and all we gotta do is stick a pipe in there to get it, chances are it might not be true, or it will require tremendous expense to treat the water to make it useful for us. So, I just think we need to move with intentionality, with care, with the Ike Kupuna, but the best science of the day, before we move forward willy-nilly and then need to take 3 steps back to repair what we are done or to install the remedial measures. But I'm really not Debbie Downer. I am, and no offenses to the Debbies out there, but living well within our means on catchment water, and this, although I would say that on the windward side of the island, Puna gets more rain than Kona does. So living within our means does not mean that we cannot live well. It just means that we need to live with intelligence and malama for the vai, for the kai, for the aina, and for each other.
Oh yeah, no, and I've been involved in a lot of conversations about, to sum it up, saving the world, right? Thinking about these global initiatives, we're going to reduce this and we're going to increase this and use less of this and do more of this. But what it all tends to come back to is the lessons that you learn growing up on an island and living within what get. Living within your 5 water tanks, living within, your 600-acre fish pond, or whatever it is. It just comes back to what you just said. Understanding where you are, what get, what no more, living within that.
And it doesn't mean you don't live well. I have a cousin in South Kona, Central Kona, out from Kihalani Ranch. Buggins Nobriga, Ha'alilio, was telling me one time, cousin, you lament too much, you kind of grumble too much about the dry times. You got to adjust your attitude. Cousin, think of this. During the dry times, you can see where the grass remains green, the pipe needs to be repaired. When the grass dies back from the fences and the stone walls, you know what needs to be repaired. When the grass dies back, you can find all those tools that you lost when the grass was green and growing luxuriantly. So I take that to heart. Ecclesiastes tells us that for everything there is a season. So there are the dry times, they are inevitable, but we prepare for them during the wet times by making the catchments righteous. We're then carried through the dry times, and we can make the other necessary repairs to be ready for when the rains return. And we pray that the rains return when they've been away from us, always.
Oh, yeah, no. And man, I'm enjoying this conversation so much. I could keep going on with you and all of my questions for hours and hours, but I wanted to put out a kahea to everyone joining us. If you have any questions or mana'o that you want to share, please pop those into the chat or into the Q&A function. Man, it's so enjoyable just to listen to mo'olelo too. Sometimes hard to think of questions.
And that's the beauty of it. Yeah, and I heard Ku'ule say this yesterday also. And from the lips of one generation to the ears of the next, from the lips of one group of people to the ears of the next, that we can have enough aloha, ikekahi, that we can slow down and hear one another and to have that pleasant conversation.
Oh yeah, no. We have a couple notes in here. Debbie joined us. Debbie DeRoos says, much aloha and mahalo for your wisdom. Terry Gubbins says, this is wonderful. Can we meet every Saturday morning? There's so much wisdom in our native forests, so much wisdom in our native landscapes. And we're extremely thankful that you're here to help us, kind of unpack some of that stuff. I know for me, as I drive, I mentioned before, I drive back and forth, Kona to Hilo, Hilo back to Kona. and you sort of you get to know some features of the Aina, right? As you drive, you mentioned the scenic lookout. Okay, I know where that is. Certain pu'u, even if you don't know the name, you kind of know that, okay, this is that pu'u, this is that pu'u. I know I'm almost home. I know it's time to call and check to see if anybody needs anything from town. I know I'm, 45 from whatever. So you get to know these things, but what are some of the highlights for you looking from where you are, looking out over the Aina? What are some of the landscape highlights?
We owe just a kuno of gratitude to the kupuna who translated and collected from the Hawaiian language newspapers into English Kona legends. Kona legends for us is like a placeholder, as the generations have proceeded from the time when one of my great-great-grandmothers did the translation out of the Hawaiian into the English to compile the book. Now, people speak with confidence and comfort the Olelo Hawaii, but that modest little book preserves so many of the hill names and the people associated with them. So it's a shout out to Kona legends, definitely. So from Kukuyohiwai, we look down to Puhiapele. We can see the double-humped hill of Muhe'enui. When you look at the Cinder Hills, wherever you are, there's usually a high side and a lower side. And that tells you which way the prevailing wind blew while the cinders were fountaining. Now, one time was in Hilo, driving home to Kilauea when Pu'u'o was in eruption, and was one of those times when the fountaining was 1,000 feet high, and there was a strong wind blowing out of Ka'u, and that 1,000-foot tall fountain lay on its side, and it looked like one Muhe'enui moving through the nighttime sky. I've already told you that these hills were like 10,000 years old, so I'm not saying that the old folks saw this event, but with that name in mind, when I did see the fountain blowing over, that's the first thing that came to my mind. Below Muhe'enui is Ku'ili, the double-humped cinder hill right on the ocean between Maninio Valley to the north and Makalavena to the south. But from here at Kukuyohiwai, on a clear day, we can see both sides of Maui. We can see Kaho'olawe. We can see East End Molokai. We can see Lanai. We can see West End Molokai, including Mauna Loa, and, wait for it, pause, Ka'ala on Oahu. Our son has a good telescope. One time he busted out the telescope, and if you're familiar with Oahu, we could even see Mauna Lahilahi, that famous spire of the leeward side of Oahu that rises above the coastal plain. So what I see is something that I learned from my mom, that if you have good intelligence, and what better intelligence than native intelligence? If you've got good intelligence, you can look across vast expanses of land and sea and know what you're looking at, and even relate it to other things in your life. Maybe this is the concluding story. Francis Brown of Keawaiki and Kalahui Pua'a used to, and descendant of Papa'i'i, and that's an important call out to the Brown family. So this descendant of I'i, my mom used to fish with him when she was a girl, and her parents were friends with him. And she knew what he would be catching where his boat was. And this is like in territorial Hawaii, not a lot of pleasure craft on the water. He mounted 2 outboard engines on the back of his hacker craft, so it had a distinctive wake. So I'm like 6 years old, and I'm with my mom looking down to the Kahakai, about 5 miles away. across the land from here. And she'd go, oh, Uncle Francis, he's fishing for the kole nukuheu. Oh, Uncle Francis is fishing for the uhu. Oh, I wonder if Uncle Francis is getting any hay as this boat is moving down the coastline. But I'm a little kid. I'm going, yeah, I see the boat, Mom, right. Then she'd go, oh, let's get our things together. If we go down to Kailua, Uncle Francis should be getting there soon. And we'd go down to Kailua and Uncle Francis would be pulling up. I would be looking at my mom with wonder, awe, and reverence. He'd open up his, the old Coleman cooler, the metal-sided one, the one with the Scotch plaid on it. He'd be opening up the Coleman cooler, and there would be the he'e, the uhu, the kole nukuheu. And all that I would be able to say was, I am not worthy, I am not worthy. You are my mother, I am not worthy. But she taught me that important lesson. Gather the best intelligence that you have at your disposal and apply your native sensibility, and it's a beautiful thing. Nani no.
Nani maoli no.
Eh.
Nana or Nana, I'm not sure, asks, you mentioned Kona Legends. She asks, are there any other classes, books, or places to learn the mo'olelo of the areas that you were sharing about?
The like I'm a bit of a dunce with electronic things, but I believe that there, and you may know better than I, that there are websites and electronic places that you can go where these mo'olelo are translated. I'm thinking of the work that Puakea Nogelmeyer and his students at the University of Hawaii at Manoa are doing. I'm also thinking of some of the cultural impact and analysis work that Kepa Mele has done. And many of these mo'olelo, these histories, I hesitate to call them legends because the names are real and so are the places. And we have nothing to nudge them into that fairy tale realm. There's a tremendous amount of information encoded in them, including our mo'olelo, our mo'okuauhau, our genealogies. Sometimes when we see these legendary names as applied to places, there's a wonderful story of unrequited love from between a boy, Uluveuveu, which is the bay at Kukio, and a girl, Kahavali, whose parents were Po'opo'omino, one of the hills at the top of the Ahupua'a boundary, and a girl who had been promised to him, Maninio Valley, which is the name of that beautiful, beautiful bay and Ahupua'a. And if you think of them as legendary, these are just the place names. But then it turns out these are the ancestral names. And by applying them to places, okay, this is more than 220 years later, we're still talking about those folks that called this place home long, Ikawamamau, in the distant past. But it's our past. It's our shared intelligence. It's our shared sensibility. So I'm sorry, I'm not just saying Fornander, volume 2, but
I actually leaned over to see if my Kona Legends was accessible, but it's on the bookcase behind this backdrop here. So.
Oh, well, I can do that.
Oh, there you go.
You see, it's right at the ready. It wasn't in the reference pile. And this is, it's available at a number of places, but Petroglyph Press republishes it periodically. Hey, I have an email for you.
Sure.
How was this without pictures? Was it okay?
You have such a command of storytelling that I had the pictures in my mind without a PowerPoint.
Cool.
However, I did want to offer that, just for, even if it was only to hang out with you, I'd be happy to come help you with your slides.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
because, you know, I have been kind of kupa'a on that, like with the annual conservation conference. Back in the carousel and slides day, I was a slideshow queen. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm boasting. But so I appreciate the story that the pictures tell. But as we got into the PowerPoint generation, it was like people forgot to look at the speaker. People
Yeah.
forgot to pay attention to the lips that were giving the information to their ears. And then I just like refused to get on board because that's another veil between us. When we cannot
Hmm.
look at the speaker, I believe that our communication is poorer for it. So last night, I was just after having watched Ku'ulei yesterday and knowing the value of the images, I was like, oh my, oh gosh, why did I do that? But I appreciate both your compliment and your willingness to move me into the 21st century. Mahalo. Maybe we can do this next year with pictures.
Sure. If for no other reason than just in case the slides get a little bit popopo, we go scan them and preserve.
Oh.
One thing I do with a mentor and friend of mine who really enjoys his slide decks is as long as there's not too much on it and you leave them up a long time, people go and look and then look back to the speaker.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it gets if everything he's saying is on the slide, then people can just read the slide, yeah. But if it's just that one powerful image that requires further interpretation, then you invite folks back to the embrace of your story.
And I think using the image rather than the verbiage, yeah,
Absolutely.
because it does just enhance it. But I did see on the Q&A that there was a question about goats. Do we have time?
Yes, absolutely.
So so goats. Our family, like I was describing earlier, went from being fishermen and farmers, gardeners. Goat hides were our entry into the capital economy. Yeah, Vancouver had let them loose so that they would have food that was familiar to them when the adventurers and explorers came to Hawaii. Cattle also. So when people go, really, the capital economy? Think all those cowboy movies and Western shows and all that leather. Even until today, sometimes we use the phrase, oh, we needed to handle him with kid gloves. Kid, baby goat skin gloves. When you handle someone sensitively, you put on the soft gloves. You know, chamois, I think, is deerskin gloves. But they were they had an important place in time, for better or worse. They had their time. During my great-great-grand's time, some of those pictures maybe we'll collect for a future presentation. Show them up at Hu'ehue, on horseback, going down to the beach, and everybody is like carrying weapons, and they're not in the scabbards, they're out. And it was a condition of our Kamehameha Schools lease to harvest, well, to diminish the number of goats. Because even in the turn of the 19th into the 20th century, people recognized the bad impact that they were having on the forest. There's a story of the kokio, a federally registered endangered species, that the old folks liked to use as a treatment for their nets. It made their nets, among other things, more durable. Kukui was a secondary choice for treatment of nets. People would come from as far away as Konahema to the Kaha lands to collect kokio bark to treat their nets. In territorial Hawaii, the kahea went out not to do this anymore, to let the kokio live. And so friends from South Kona say, and then we stayed home and used the kukui. So there are a couple of elements to this story: an observation, the diminishment of the kokio, an action, protection of the kokio, and people's compliance to the kahea of the day. Shoot, and can you help me? I don't even know why I launched into that story. Goats.
Goats.
At that time, it was a condition of the lease to diminish the number of goats, so they would go out and do that. The territory of Hawaii had a similar program. There are stories of goat drives on public land now, on the public lands of Pu'uanahulu, by the steel tank, by the hunter check-in station, out that away by the Ohia unit, Ohia and Lama unit out there, where drives would occur across the landscape, people coming together, the general public, Boy Scouts, cowboy families certainly, where the goats were driven across the landscape down to Kiholo, and then they were summarily dispatched. Salvage what can, leave the rest. 7,000 goats in one drive, 8,000 goats in another drive. From the 20s through World War II, this concerted effort to diminish the number of goats, what could be eaten, was made. The numbers finally got down to where it was no longer reasonable to try and drive goats. I mean, you know what those lava lands look like. Difficult to drive with small numbers. So they stopped doing that. We, of course, can see now the results of both failure to manage and lack of political information to the citizens as to why this may or may not be a good population to leave, being all willy-nilly. Look, it's Willie Rice out on the landscape. So yes, I have seen the number of goats increase in my lifetime. When I was born into a time when there were less goats, but we used to hunt. When I was talking about being a remedial hunter, that double hump Cinder Hill ku'ili was a frequent spot that we would go across the lava lands and hunt there in the afternoon. And I used the kako advisedly. I had a BB gun. So.
Remedial hunting class.
Oh yeah.
No, it's, and the goats kind of coming around to back where we started with the Waikoloa Dry Forest Initiative and similar initiatives to reforest our native species. Goats are kind of the number one. Goats and pigs might be tied for the arch nemesis of reforestation activities. And I've heard that Mo'olelo before about driving the goats, and now you see that many goats hanging out by minute stop when you're putting in gas, getting a chicken. So, plenty.
Yeah. So again, it's what is our intelligence? What is our sensibility? You know, when I was growing up, jerk goat steaks, what law? Goat is the most, as I understand it, it's the most consumed terrestrial protein on the planet. It's all in the marinade. You know, my husband raises sheep, but I'm a goat enthusiast. So our son, Kekalike, works out at Ho'olamakana'a, and they salvage those animals that get inside of their exclosure. And there's a place for them. There's a place for them, but not with the native dryland forest plants.
Well, you know. Okay, we have one more question from the audience, and then we're going to take a brief break before we come back with our next presentation. Willie Rice talking about the drylands of Kohala and their Pelekane restoration project. So our last question is from Terry. Any donkey stories?
Well, there was a time that I was walking to the beach, and I had passed Puhiapele, and I was going on the ranch Jeep roads. I passed Puhiapele, so I started out at 2,000 feet. I'm down below 2,000 feet. I'm down below 1,300 feet, and I hear these footsteps behind of me, and I'm by myself. And I turn around and all I see is lantana and fountain grass, and I keep walking and I hear footsteps and I stop. I turn around and all I see is fountain grass and lantana. I go some more, hear them. I turn around and see these two donkeys following me. And, donkeys are mean animals. they kick and they bite, and I have some other just nasty baby Hannah scared by the donkey stories, but a thing with them, and like the goats, they served the time of our ancestors well. Now we're in the capital economy time, if you had your opelu, say from Makalavena, and you were taking it to the store in Kalawa, the donkeys were your means of transportation. They were, our Willie's Jeep in the days. They allowed for transport and ease of life. And that's one of the things that in our romance and our idealism, sometimes we forget about the practicality. We don't want the pipeline, but we still want to drive our Ram Charger. There are those ironies, there are those inconsistencies. A thing with the goats, the donkeys here in this region, I know that there's a great Save the Donkeys campaign. Among other things, it's a limited genetic pool. So, I don't know how healthy the population is, and they are a hazard on the highway. But just for that moment, walking across through the fountain grass and lantana with the donkeys trailing me was just kind of eerie, and kind of like, when I saw what they were, I didn't necessarily feel safer.
That's awesome. There's so many mo'olelo. We could do this all day. But jumping back to that question about where else can folks find mo'olelo about these places, two great digital sources are ulukau.org and papakilodatabase.com. I dropped those in the chat. The one caution is that think of these places as warehouses. The mo'olelo are in there, especially those from the old newspapers. You got to spend some time in there. It's not as easy as clicking, give me all the mo'olelo of Kona. You got to go and you got to spend the time to read, but a lot of that stuff is there. So those are two resources to look at. Certainly the Kona Legends book that Hannah had so easily at hand. And please support your local booksellers as you get copies of that. We're gonna be talking to Willie Rice about his work in Kohala at 11. I do want to give everybody a moment for a bio break. So at this time, you have any closing mana'o?
Aloha i ke kahi. Aloha maulua. E mālama pono.
Mahalo nui a oe kuka ana mai nui ko mahalo i ke kuka ana. And I'll come see you soon for the slides.
Ho'oli au I ke wala awana, and I look forward to. I see Jen offered to help out too, so I look forward to talking more. Aloha nui.
Awesome. Mahalo. So folks, let's take a 5-minute break. Bio break, get your snacks, top off your coffee. We will be back in 5 minutes at 11 o'clock with Willie Rice talking about the restoration work at Pelekane up north in Kohala. We'll see you soon. Aloha ho kako, welcome back. The 10th annual Waikoloa Dry Forest Initiative Wiliwili Festival. Really happy to have all of you here. We just had a wonderful morning talking story with Hannah Kihalani Springer, Kamaaina of Kukui Ohivai, some of her memories of the changes to our aina through the years, and the thing that remained, which was the people and their commitment to the aina. We're looking forward to talking story with our next presenter. He's from up north in Kohala. First, we want to take a moment to thank everyone for being here at the Wiliwili Festival. Mahalo to our sponsors, Waikoloa Plaza, Hawaii Forest and Trail, Hawaii Water Service, the Waikoloa Foundation, Hawaiian Ethos, the Hilton Waikoloa Village, NG Hawaii, Forest Solutions, and First Hawaiian Bank. Also want to remind everyone to go check out our exhibitors in the exhibitor hall on Huva. Lots of great information there about efforts near and far to malama this place. Also want to remind everyone to check out the silent auction. It ends at 6 o'clock tonight. We got wonderful artwork, activities, food, gifts, you name it, we got it. There's also some live silent auction items at the Dusty Donkey Emporium at the Waikoloa Stables, Mauka of Waikoloa Village. Go check that out. And thanks to the generosity of an anonymous donor, everything that the initiative makes from the silent auction, this anonymous donor is going to match it. So every dollar you contribute makes $2 for the Waikoloa Dry Forest Initiative. Mahalo nui to everyone who donated items to our silent auction, as well as our anonymous donor who is doubling those proceeds. So we have our next presenter on the line, Willie Rice. He's going to talk about Pelekane in Kohala. Aloha, Willie. How you doing?
Aloha. I am doing pretty good.
Awesome. You are out there at Pelekane, it looks like.
I am in the bush.
All right. Well, we hope you have some good reception as you share the mo'olelo with us. Did you want to talk story kind? You get your presentation? How you want to do this? Totally up to you.
Yeah, I've got a presentation which is just flipping through photographs, and I've got some talking points, but I'm more of the talk story kind of guy, and I like answering questions, so I'd much rather it be as interactive as possible. So interrupt, and yeah, I'll do my best to not get interrupted on the side by my talk and pay attention to what's going on the screen.
All good. Okay, so I'll jump off for now. You can share, and then I'll come back. Folks in the audience, if you have anything you want to share, any questions, drop them in the chat, drop them in the Q&A, and I'll come back and we'll take them together.
Sounds great. Thanks, Idehia.
For joining us.
All right, I'm going to assume everything is good because now I can only see my presentation and not much of what else is going on. So
looks good, man. Looks good.
All right, good. Yeah, perfect. That's helpful. So first, thanks to Waikoloa Dry Forest, Jen, Rob, and the gang over there. I really appreciate the invite. We spent some time out in the field, all three of us, and I was really looking forward to being more involved in this. So a little bit about me. My name is Willie Rice. I work for Forest Solutions. We're a small private forest management company. We started with eucalyptus plantations in Hamakua, but in about 2003, we started dipping our toe into conservation work. And that's been more or less the majority of our work over the past 17 years or so. And I got started initially doing that conservation work and a few eucalyptus things. my family, my rice side of my family is Kamaina to Kauai. There's various tribes of us Rices. I live in Waimea now. There's kind of a Waimea tribe for sure. And they're cousins, of course, but my grandfather was raised on Kauai, and my father was raised in Oahu, but spent most of his summers on Kauai there. And I return as often as I can, but not so much in the last year or so. So I'm going to do my best to walk you through all these photographs that I have and present to you some of the restoration work we've done in Pelikane watershed on Queen Emma land. I'll flick through photos. Anytime you got a question about a photo, I'll do my best to go back and we can look at it and you can ask questions. There's some landscape ones. There are some close-up of pictures and irrigation and digging and various little intricate details of the operation. And I'm happy to answer any questions with that too. So I'll do my best to go back when we need to. And I realize I've been a part of several Wiliwili festivals, booths and whatnot. And I realize this is a really, community effort. And every time I'm there in Waikoloa, at a booth, I get a huge range of questions, from does koa grow in Waikoloa to much more difficult questions, of course, as well from the passerbys, which then I usually have to go find Jen or Rob or point them in that direction to answer the technical questions. So like I said, I'll do my best, but Jen is just next door. So if anything's too tough, I'll go ask or I'll yell at Jen for some help. So orienting you to the landscape. So you see down the bottom corner is Waikoloa Dry Forest Preserve. We're up the hill. One of the things Jen and I laugh about a lot is the fact that we can kind of see each other from across the ditch or something like that. You can see the boundaries in yellow of the Pelikane watershed and the restoration enclosures that we have there. Pelikane watershed contains, for the most part, the Ahupua of Kauai Hina, or the second, and it's the greater watershed in that area is Honokoa to the Kohala side and Waiulaula to the Waikoloa side. Pelikane watershed is 13,943 acres, and the elevation of the work that I'm going to discuss today is from about 1,100 feet to just under 3,000 feet. Kind of most of the area below the mountain road, but above Kauai High. So the majority of this land is owned by the Queen Emma Land Company, related to Queen's Hospital, which we all know quite well. They're relatively new to, they've had this land for a long time, but they're relatively new to the Waimea landscape, which is a neat new exciting development. But the reasons these lands are attributed to Queen Emma is that they were passed on to her from John Young. If you've not heard of who John Young is, he was a trusted confidant of Kamehameha, and he did a lot of work in Kauai High with trade, and including sandalwood trade and cattle. So some good, some bad. And prior to the 1900s, and compared with the land use today, it was a very busy place in John Young's time. It's what the Waimea field system, the agricultural field system, is well known. And at the time, I think it was, let's see, check my notes, 1793, a botanist named Archibald Menzies had a quote here: "Most barren, scorching country I have ever walked over." But in contrast, from his view, I assume somewhere about the 1,000-foot elevation or below, he could see in the verge of the woods several fine plantations, I quote. "And my guides took great pains to inform me that the inland country was very fertile and numerously inhabited." And that area, I can only assume he's speaking of Kauai High Uka, which is, roughly the 8-mile marker down Kauai on the mountain road there. So like I said, John Young was there, engaging in lots of different trades, cattle, sandalwood. He was one of the ones that facilitated the introduction of cattle to the area. And ever since, the cattle have been in this area. In 1995, Queen Emma Land Company commissioned a botanical survey, and they found remnant pockets of excellent native forest throughout their lands. And these sites have all survived the destructive history of cattle grazing, wildfire, invasive plants and pests, and the sandalwood trade. So at the time, 11 enclosures were constructed. This is about 1998, and that protected 25 acres of this exemplary native habitat. The project has since increased in the last 20 years to 90 acres with over 18 enclosures. And these enclosures range from 1,100 feet to 4,000 feet and include dry land, mesic, and wet native forest types near the forest line. So over this term of the project, Forest Solutions has planted over 80 different native species and planted approximately 140,000 seedlings within these enclosures. So a bit more about the landscape details. The rainfall, to gauge you and maybe provide some contrast with Waikoloa, is about 5 inches down near Kauai High and about 40 inches at the mountain road there. So it's very arid down below and only gets kind of dry or kind of wet, I guess, up near the top of the mountain road. So where you folks have lots of rock, lava rock down in Waikoloa, we've got lots of dirt. And I know you've got dirt down there, Waikoloa, I'm thinking just in the preserve there, but we've got this dirt that's really powdery, difficult to work with. And compared to the rock that you have in Waikoloa, where the water infiltrates very quickly, this soil is typically hydrophobic, and we lose water running over the ground during irrigation. So that's one of the differences, but we share wind and we share fire. The picture of the ohia tree shows the wind, and this is a picture of Loa up Mauka in a fire, and I think 2003 was this fire. So stepping into some of our enclosures on the landscape, I'm going to start Makai and head Mauka. So the enclosure that I'm going to cover, there's only 3 in this presentation, but in this Makai dry zone, there's 13, which incorporate 70 acres. So there's an additional 5 enclosures at Mauka for another 20 acres, and that's all above the mountain road. So this enclosure here that we're looking at, you can see a fence post a bit more clear in the bottom photo, is what we call the Pilographs Enclosure, despite having quite a bit of buffalo grass. We have not done a lot of work in this really, really arid landscape, but we have done our best to keep the fence pa'a and to make sure we tried things over the years, albeit we were quite unsuccessful. So we do monitoring each year, and what I just flicked through was a landscape photo point, we call it. And we also have permanent sample plots that we take each year to gauge how things are changing, for better or for worse. We started in about 2008, 2009. The project, like I mentioned, started in 2000, so we didn't start monitoring right away, but we have since done a fairly good job. So this Pilographs enclosure, you can see how it hasn't changed much over time. You see a bit more dirt. The biggest thing that stands out to me in the upper left in 2009 is some of the lima that's poking its head out there. So you'll have to trust me when I say that there's some native plants in there. You see nothing but buffalo grass on the left, but on the right there, you see a bit of a mix of grasses. There's lots of peely grass in there, as well as an akia tree there in the middle. Akia bush, sorry. And this is what we're going for in that enclosure. This is right adjacent in the pasture land. You see some native herbs there in the front, a few weeds, but that is probably 95% peely grass. And up at the top there, unfortunately it's dead, but that is Centellum ellipticum, an old coastal sandalwood tree. But this is our goal in that area, is to get to that, keep the buffalo grass out, the other weeds out as best as we can, and try and get this across the landscape. So since this is Wiliwili Festival, I have included our one enclosure with beautiful Wiliwili trees. There's roughly 20 to 25 trees throughout the property there, the Pelikani Bay, Pelikani watershed. And this enclosure incorporates, I think, 5 of the biggest trees that we have there on the property. You can see the rows in the middle were planted in 2009 and grew quite a bit in about a year and a half. But we lost a Wiliwili tree there at the bottom. And that was due to the Wiliwili gall wasp, which have been rampant all over the property. And we struggle to deal with that. And we've gotten lots of guidance from Rob and Jen at Waikoloa Dry Forest to try and help us get through our Wiliwili, not die back, but they are slowly dying off. And we struggle to get good growth on new ones we put into the ground as well. We have several stunted plants that haven't grown much more than an inch in 10 or so years. They put little leaves out. We know they're alive each year, but they barely grow. So this is the same enclosure. This is enclosure number 6. You can see, let's see, we're 4 years on now. And then we're in 2019 last year. And a lot of my photos, you kind of see the seasonal differences on the landscape too, March and November, right? So this should be a fairly dry time in November heading into winter and a fairly wet time in March, but it's not. That's the changes we're seeing on the landscape. We had an amazingly wet year, second half of 2018, 2019. So these again are permanent sample plots, 2009, 12, 15, and 2019 there. Same Wiliwili tree in the background, planted, or you can see in the foreground where we planted Koya and Ali'i. 2019, things are growing well. So are the weeds. We're not scared of weeds. We want the forest to grow and do its thing and eventually shade out. And we try and minimize spraying as much as we can. A lot more difficult to do that in the first stages of planting. But as things grow and you get to canopy closure, we usually have much better shading and a reduction in the really bad invasives that compete, such as lantana and whatnot. But the grasses and some of the annual herbs, they come back, but they're really not worth spraying for us. It's very expensive, time consuming, and the guys often make mistakes and damage the native plants. So here's some of the planting on the ground in the same Wiliwili enclosure. You see some Aveo there on the left, and A'ali'i there on the right, and the Kalu'i in the foreground of the picture on the right. And this is to share with you Wiliwili lovers of just a neat picture of the gnarly Wiliwili that we have within that enclosure. So moving upslope near the mountain road, this is enclosure 10 and one of our oldest enclosures. It was initially put there to protect the Nile. There was quite a nice Nile forest in the area. You can see some of that remnant dead stumps in the pasture there as well. But again, contrasting different excuse me, different times of the year, and how dry this landscape can get, and conversely how wet it can get as well. And something to note too, on our initial enclosures, the those first, what did I say, 15, check my notes there, enclosures were done with just barbed wire fencing, and they did an excellent job. The biggest detriment to the landscape at the time were the cattle, and just the cattle needed to be kept away, and we did not have significant impacts from pigs. This is obviously, you know, kind of location based, so we were able to see significant cost savings with just using barbed wire fencing, which is kind of, it might be a unique situation, but I caution that the expense people incur these days with hog wire may not always be necessary. So this is when Nile thrip showed up. Those were our Nile trees in the middle of those pictures, within the enclosure as well as outside. But we had terrible dieback with the Nile thrip. It really just about wiped out every single Nile throughout Pilographs. A few that we've planted, the smaller trees, younger trees, I guess, have survived and have not grown much, but they have survived. But the historical Puna have not, unfortunately. So a couple years on, we went back in there and replanted, focused on Amane, Kauai, Iliahi, and some shrubs in the area, and took the space in the canopy of that the Nile once occupied. This is a look on the ground, similar time frame, 2009, just before the thrip kind of started getting real bad there. You can see some larger Nile in the back, and then just make out a leaf right as you look towards Wiliwili in the distance there. It's a Nile branch there. But you see 2012, bad. 2015, we started doing replanting in there. In 2019, we've got that canopy closure that we're looking for, and gobs of leaf litter. and crab spiders too. Anybody wants to walk through there, I'd be happy to take you sometime. So some of the irrigation techniques we've used over the last 20 years. Spaghetti was the choice back in the day in the upper left corner. Worked fine at the time, but boy, is that stuff not fun to clean up. And I would reckon that you'd probably leaving a bigger mess in the landscape, even if you plant that whole area with all the poly tubing you leave out there. It can get really messy, and it can be really sketchy with consistent watering. Our guys used to trip over it all the time. If we had a pig or a goat get in there, they would trip on it. They would cause trouble. So we lost a lot of plants that way. So we transitioned to the bottom left corner, to poly tube again with the little blue emitter, just a spray emitter rather than anything that drips. That we do our best job to focus in and kind of a bowl that we make around the plant. Again, because the soils are fairly hydrophobic there. Catch that water, give it time to infiltrate. But with that setup, we can roll them up when we feel that everything's established, and shift all that irrigation to somewhere else. It's still a bit of a mess, and you do end up with quite a bit of waste. But you are saving some. Some other techniques that we've played with on the right there. Everybody loves deep watering with PVC pipe. And then at the bottom there is dry water, kind of gel stuff that it works. You know, I think everything has its place. It's niche where it can be best utilized. it's good to have a big, fat Home Depot sized toolbox to pick out whatever you may need at any one point in time, because I found that everything works given the right situation, and given the right commitment to understand how to best make it work. And of course, hydrogels. We use them in the right place. Down at the lower elevations is too dry, and the science says it actually takes water away from the plants. But this is a good picture of one that we pulled out of the ground, and you can see the hydrogels there at the bottom, swollen up with dirt and the roots kind of intertwined there. Just a fun standalone picture. Something else we've done too is to put liquid fertilizer. We kind of make a slurry. We dip the plants in there and put them out into the field, and it does increase survival. But as you saw, we also have irrigation, so if we don't have to incur that expense, then we just go for irrigation. Some of our planting techniques, so it's ex-pasture. There's a heck of a lot of compaction, over 100 years of compaction up there. So it's really hard to plant, but you can dig a hole, and that's what you see on the left. It's also a good example of why it's called spaghetti irrigation. And then on the right there, we have more of our modern technique with the polyline, and we use that implement on the bottom. It's called a spot cultivator. It comes from Aotearoa, and we've adapted it to dig holes for us in hard to reach locations, rough terrain, places a bulldozer or a tractor can't go, to rip grounds. Works exceptionally well. That fork you see in the front can brush off kikuyu grass or slash or anything that might be in the way, and that ripper shank is just dragged through the ground and then lifted straight up just to till the soil in a spot where we could put 1 to 5 plants and focus the irrigation in there. And we see great growth results as well from using that technique. It really gets the roots growing, makes the tree quite happy. They don't have to battle with that compaction. So there's also a wet landscape in the dry landscape. Throw through fun photos here at the end. This is a gulch running within one of our enclosures. And on the right, I've always loved this. This is Kimole Falls, near, everybody calls it the Old Egg Farm, but it's right near Waikoloa. But I mean, it's a 60, 70-foot waterfall in the middle of 5 inches of rain. I've yet to see it go. Some of the results and some of the people that have been involved in the past. In the bottom left, there's some of the first movers. Benton Pang there with the green shirt in the front is the one who did the botanical survey back in 1995. Les Goya really pushed this project in the beginning. It's one of our first foresters, Janine Lum, and unidentified old uncle there, obviously with Fish and Wildlife Service too, though. And then up in the right corner is my good buddy, JR. He was our nursery manager for 10, 15 years. And I mean, this guy's produced thousands and thousands of plants for our different projects, including all of the eucalyptus that we see in Hamakua. Very talented. So mahalo for listening and checking out my pictures. I'm happy to answer questions.
Oh, solid. Mahalo for that, Willie. We do have one question that came in on the chat. Do you think that this reforestation can be scaled up in a meaningful way? So what would it take to revegetate all of that Aina Pelekane, and is that a reasonable goal?
Yeah, sure. I'm not afraid of a challenge. But you have places that are easier and harder, and you have challenges that are easier to overcome and harder to overcome. The land use is probably the first one that pops into my head as far as that area goes. And then access issues as well, to get into these different areas, to do the work, bring the fencing in, bring the irrigation, bring the plants in. But we're trying to scale things up with a few projects this year, actually, and they're centered around a restoration trial that focuses on what plants do the best at holding the erosion back in this landscape. And so pilographs, is kind of the warrior in the battle to get out there in this lower landscape where we have really bad erosion. But yeah, it's a land use question. You can focus on riparian corridors. You can focus on the really bad areas and restoring those, and making some sort of a balance there. It's not all going to happen a year, but good planning will get you maybe 5-10 acres a year or something. And I think that would be something people could be happy with.
So 5 to 10 acres a year. How big is the whole area?
The whole area is, the Pelicani water says 13,000 acres, but you're talking nice Kikuyu grassland up above 2,000 feet or so. So below 2,000 feet, you've probably got 3,000 or 4,000 acres. But of that, the restorable land that's not used for pasture it would have to be determined. So say you've got 1,000 acres, then you work at 5 to 10, and maybe after messing it up as much as you can for a couple of years, you figure out how to do 50 acres a year, and then maybe 100.
Right. So there isn't really a magic bullet for this work, because every terrain is different, every aina is different, every kind of historical use has left. It's different kinds of challenges on the aina, like you mentioned, the compaction factor because it was pasture. So there isn't really a magic bullet for this work.
Right. Exactly. I couldn't have said it better. There's not, and that's part of the fun. You always got the next challenge around the corner, and every single buddy looks at a solution differently as well. You involve the people and the brains we have in the restoration community, and yeah, it's really fun to listen to people to figure out ways to solve the problems and scale up, and not only scale up, but focus in and be more intensive. We have, we kind of send out the warrior plants, and then we do enrichment planting 2 years down the road. But a lot of people do things differently. People are as varied as the landscape.
It's a huge challenge for sure. But you mentioned the collaboration with other restoration reforestation projects, and up at the top you mentioned working with Jan and Rob, and this is really a community effort. Even though folks are in different places, through the course of this festival, we've talked to folks in Ka'u, doing work in Ka'u. We've talked to folks, a little bit south in Kona, and we're hearing from you now. So there really is some strength in community when it comes to reforestation and restoration efforts. Yeah,
it definitely is. Even if you start branching out to other islands and to Aotearoa as well, all over the world, they have really neat situational restoration operations. And like I was talking about the toolbox, you can't ever throw anything out of the toolbox, even if it's rusty and broken. Might have a good use at some point. So just keep growing that toolbox, and you grow that toolbox by working with others, I think.
Well, for sure. We just moved house, and through the process of moving, going through things, like you get 17 of the same screwdrivers, but you never know. Might need 15 one day.
Yeah.
So the accumulation of tools and really the willingness to share those tools, I think is really advancing this work forward, because it's not from what I've seen, and my nails kind of clean. I'm not the reforestation guy out there in the field, but from what I've seen, there's a real spirit of collaboration and sharing and willingness to teach those best practices, understanding that you got to adapt to each site and everything, but there's a real collaborative environment with folks doing this work.
Yeah, you never know who's going to have some experience in answering the problem that you have. And these days it's a lot easier to find solutions on the internet, but if you don't have a personal relationship with some of these projects, Rob's one of the best guys with dealing with these little go-offs, and it's really neat. It's really inspiring to see what he's done, the changes he made, the flowers he gets off these really it makes you want to really be able to achieve whatever other people have in other projects.
Oh, for sure. This whole experience has left me wanting to go reforest someplace, and I hope that many people in our in the audience today are likewise inspired. Go hug a tree, go plant a tree, go pull some weeds, go yank some invasives. Find the aina nearest you and work them. Huli kalima ilalo.
Yeah, I mean, start in your yard. You don't have to go out there. Just get something in the yard. Rip out that mock orange or what have you, and put something native in there.
Well, we're working on that in our yard. I'm all bust up from trying to pull out these cactuses and palm trees that were in the front for some reason. I don't know, maybe there was a Californian and an Arizonian who used to live here. They wanted to commemorate, their aina by planting these very varied pokey things, but we yanking them.
Which is a great cultural thing in Hawaii. There's a lot of that has been brought in, and it's very unique. I really appreciate that part. Where it goes bad is when it becomes unmanaged. It leaves their house. It starts spreading because no one lives there anymore. So no. But the more we can put natives in the ground, the better off we all are, and your water bill will probably be cheaper too.
Oh, definitely. And like we were talking about with Hannah, we all live on catchment, whether we know it or not. There's a finite quantity of water here that we all got to be mindful of.
For sure.
Well, Brother Willie, mahalo nui for joining us today. Really appreciate you sharing, and certainly appreciate all the hard work you putting in Pelikane.
Not just me, everybody.
Oh yeah, that's a kako thing for sure. And when we think about the larger landowners, like Queen Emma Foundation, where it's not only taking the kuleana to Malama that land for the sake of taking care of that land, but that's the kind of foundation where those proceeds go into healthcare for our community at Queens North Hawaii Hospital and other places. Lili Okalani Trust further south in Kona has a lot of aina, and proceeds from that go to taking care of those keiki who, keiki in all kinds of situations. Take care of Kamehameha schools, education, all that.
And the keiki have an opportunity to, in turn, come out to the land and see things, learn things, and maybe change their perspective on what they want to do in the future. We don't all need to be policemen and what have you.
We need some conservationists.
Yeah.
Plenty.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Brother Willie, mahalo for joining us. Appreciate it, man. And keep fighting the good fight out there.
You're welcome.
All right, gang. So we have our next thing before we break for lunch and another period of time to go check out our exhibitors and the silent auction. We are going to take a walk through Waikoloa. And this is a new video tour featuring Waikoloa Dry Forest and Alakahakai Trails. We're going to have some live Q&A with our friend Rob right after this. So, Jen, do we have that video ready? Oh, Jen's on it. Okay, so enjoy this short film produced by our friends at Shibi Style, and we'll be back with Q&A in as soon as this is done.
Aloha mai kako. I'm Rob Yagi, and I'll be your guide on a walking tour of one of Hawaii's native dry forests right here in Waikoloa on the west coast of Hawaii Island. On today's walking tour, we'll be exploring what makes this rugged landscape so unique and what the Waikoloa Dry Forest Initiative is doing to preserve, protect, and restore this unique ecosystem. So strap on those boots and let's get going. Waikoloa is a vast arid region neighboring Pu'uanuhulu to the south, Lalomilo to the north, and Anai Ho'omalu at the coastline. Waikoloa is known for being one of the driest regions in all of Hawaii, and is also known for its strong winds. Today, the vistas of Waikoloa are filled with vast lava fields, sweeping grasslands, and sparse kiawe trees. But the truth is, Waikoloa didn't always look this way. It was once a diverse forest full of beautiful trees, unique flowers, and useful plants. Now, as a result of wildfire and damage caused by invasive plants and animals, it is estimated that only 5% of Hawaii's dry forests still remain, but only sporadic relics of this once grand forest still stand. The critically endangered uhi-uhi and the culturally significant Wiliwili are some of the only remnants of the once large and vibrant forest that once stood here. In this particular region, Wiliwili was and still is the most iconic of this ecosystem. This tree has been named Hi'ialo. One meaning of Hi'ialo is to be in such a place where your loved ones can see you, held close to the chest, or upon returning from a long journey. Hi'ialo guides us, and we hope that by sharing this tree and this place with people, that they will continue to be loved and cared for. People have always had a reverence for Wiliwili, both because of its useful wood and because it's always changing in response to the one thing that makes this forest so unique, rainfall or lack thereof. As the rains return to the drylands, as we're seeing now, the Wiliwili canopies are green and lush, and as the leaves begin to fall away, orange bark of the branches is revealed right as we move into summer. These trees can remain dormant for months in the severe droughts, but typically they'll create flower buds and make beautiful orange flowers in the heat of the dry season. These flowers will attract birds with their beautiful showy petals an ample supply of nectar. And finally, the trees will complete their cycle by producing these amazing red seeds which will drop down to the soil and wait for the rain. Hi'ialo, this ancient Wiliwili tree, is a symbol of resilience, a snapshot of the past, and guides us as we rebuild the forest for the future. While Wiliwili is an important keystone species of this ecosystem, it is one of many unique and storied plants that belong in this forest. We have the habitat builders like Ilima and A'ali'i that grow quickly, make a lot of leaf litter, and start to rebuild the soil that once was here. We also have the ground covers, such as Ilia'e, Avikibiki, and Kualiava, that will cover up areas that might otherwise be invaded by weeds. We have the larger trees like the Iliahi and Lama that will continue to grow and create the overstory of this forest once again. And then there are other species that are so rare that they only exist in these protected areas or have been reduced to very low numbers like the Ko'oloa'ula or the uhi-uhi that still persists in Waikoloa. Restoration can be a challenging concept, and when we don't have an exact blueprint to restore to, it's important that we pay attention and let the forest guide the way sometimes. Each plant tells us a story, and as we learn more about each story, we gain a better understanding of this forest. Over time, this forest will be able to sustain itself. The plants will continue to grow, seed, and become more diverse, edging out the invasive species that currently thrive in this degraded landscape. To get there, though, it requires a lot of work. Restoration isn't something that we do for ourselves, nor could we be successful without a community that actively participates and engages in the stewardship of this amazing place. Since establishing the preserve, we have been fortunate enough to have the support of the community behind us and have welcomed learners and volunteers of all ages and backgrounds to experience the forest. As people connect or reconnect to the forest, a greater understanding is happening. A greater understanding of our place, our communities, our families, and even ourselves. And who knows where that connection will lead to next. Mahalo for joining me in the forest today. We hope to see you in the preserve soon, and that you'll join us in the rewarding work of restoring this incredible landscape.
Wow, that was a great video. And Rob is probably winning the prize for having the most different outfits over the course of this Wiliwili festival. Aloha, Rob. How you doing, man?
Hey, how's it going, everybody?
How's the preserve today?
Oh man, it's going off. So many wonderful people visiting. We got great volunteers. Everybody's doing a great job out here.
Awesome. So, tell us a little more about that video. Like, when did you guys make that, and who's gonna see that?
Oh man, the video was pretty awesome to be a part of. We filmed it about 2 weeks ago, and I was a little bit worried because we hadn't had much rainfall yet, so the forest was looking a little bit dry, but what do you expect? It's a dry forest. And I mean, I had a script prepared. It was my first time being in front of a professional video crew, and so my script was like, oh man, this is not, you know, how I would normally talk. So I was stumbling over the lines, but overall it was an excellent experience. Loved every minute of it. Can't wait to do it again.
Awesome. That's great. So folks out there, if you have questions for Rob, whether they were new ones based on this video or leftover questions from yesterday or just stuff you've been thinking about, we all know Rob's the man. So go ahead and drop your questions in the chat or in the Q&A, and we will get them on over to him so he can answer them. But I guess for starters, what are we seeing behind you? I see one plant kind of right on the edge of the frame there.
All right. Yep. We're here right by the hale. We're looking at this lava flow behind me. We've got some a'ali'i back here, one of our habitat builders. We've got some aveo hiding. We can even see right here, this is Hanaho, one of the trees featured in the video, hiding in the back over there. One of the wonderful Wiliwili there. And many tiny Wiliwili here. There's even an Ohe Makai hiding back there somewhere.
Nice. You picked a good spot, man.
Right.
So Terry, mahalo Terry for asking great questions throughout the day. Terry's asking, is the preserve open daily now?
That's a very good question, and we're about to have a big reveal soon. I don't want to say too much, but yeah, as long as I'm here and the gate's open, then people are welcome to come walk around. And we have a little sign-in sheet at the front, make sure the gate's closed, but all that should be okay. And yeah, as long as you can drive in and the yellow gate's there, feel free to come on in. And we've been doing a lot of trail improvements. And for those of you that have come out to the preserve here at the festival, you might have seen some of the informational signs that we just put in. So all of the trails are new and improved. You can come learn all about the forest and do self-guided tours. So yeah, come check us out.
Oh, exciting stuff. You know, Brother Willie and I were just talking a little bit about how, yes, there are all these awesome restoration, reforestation projects going on in neighborhoods near us. But he also mentioned this idea that, you know, we can start in our yards. We can start bringing the native plants back in our yards. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about that.
Definitely. I mean, if you live in these, wherever the dry forest persisted at one time, all of these plants will do really, really well in your yard. If you come to my house, my yard looks kind of crazy. I have a big hau tree in the front. I let the weeds grow, and then a lot of people think I'm growing a lot of weeds, but I let the uhaloa grow wild. And I have a small ilima patch. So when it comes to my own yard, I'm still working on it. Bear with me. But yeah, all of these plants, and there's so many beautiful plants. And then once they get established, you don't have to water them anymore. So they're just happy and healthy growing on their own. They'll reseed themselves. And we're trying to get as many plants into people's hands as possible. So if you're looking for a plant and you're near Waikoloa today, come check out the native plant giveaway. We still have a handful of species left. Want to grow a Wiliwili tree in your yard, come pick one up. We have ground covers and some shrubs. So Ilima is a great one, I think, for everybody. And yeah, I mean, in your yard is the way to go. We have these pockets of preserves, but if it could jump from neighborhood to neighborhood, then all the better.
Oh, for sure. How about for folks who, you know, in the Waikoloa area and certainly all over the place, we got a lot of condos, maybe folks who don't have a whole yard. Are there any natives in particular that do well in containers if we wanted to just have a little bit, on the lanai?
Yeah, definitely. We have some native mints. We call them the mintless mints. Kupali'i is what we call them, but they have kind of a lemony scent to them, and they like to grow in the nursery, and they just come up wild in there. And so I think that could be a great containerized pot. We have some Wiliwili that are in pots. I mean, ultimately they want to go in the ground, but we've heard even people doing bonsai Wiliwili trees, and from what I hear, they're really impressive. And so those can last in the pot for a little while, and then maybe if you do find a home for it, they'll be happy in the ground. But yeah, there's all different types of plants, and of course I'm still learning in that regard too. So if you find something, let us know. And we've been working with different partners trying to get plants in the ornamental landscape. So as we learn more, we'll have more and more information to share.
Oh, that's awesome. One thing we talked about with a number of our presenters, we had our friends from Ka'u yesterday. We just talked to Willie, a little bit north of you guys. Had a good conversation with Auntie Hannah. There's a lot of collaboration that goes on amongst the folks who are doing this sort of restoration and reforestation work. What's your take on the importance of that kind of collaboration?
Oh man, it's not possible without talking to other folks. I mean, you can live in your own little pocket and in your own little island and not really talk to many. And that's what I love about working here with Waikoloa Dry Force, is that we do have so many lines of communication, because we're all trying to do the same things. We're trying to reach the same goals. And for many of us, there's overlap in the plant species or animal species, from site to site. So we're all seeing similar issues. So if you have someone to kind of bounce ideas off of, in the case of the gall wasp, those things are attacking the Wiliwili in these cycles, and not much is known beyond the release of the biocontrol, and no kind of more robust studies, or not many studies have been performed in that regard post-release of the biocontrol. So that's one of the things that we try to look into and see what we can to steward some of these things and try to push the envelope forward. And how can we do that without communicating with each other? So that's what I really look forward to. And the partnerships and talking to people that have come out to the preserve, I've seen dozens of pictures of Wiliwili trees that people have planted from taking some home from the Wiliwili festivals of the past. And oh man, there's some 7, 8, 9 feet tall. They look like one that had a trunk that maybe was 12 inches diameter from from one of the earliest festivals. And so just seeing those things pop up in people's yard, it's incredible. And those seeds are gonna spread themselves around, and Wiliwili can be a part of all of our lives again.
That's really, really great, man. Good stuff. So, if I was out there with you today, I definitely want to get back out there and just go hug a tree. So I won't keep you too much longer. We do have one question from James Yarnall in the Q&A. James asks, do you work with the Amy Greenwell Botanical Garden in South Kona? James usually spends his Saturday mornings there with a group that toils on the landscaping and propagation of native plants. It's very similar, relatively speaking, to what you do. I assume you do exchange ideas and such, but just thought I would ask. And also a quick plug for them. The Amy Greenwell Botanical Garden in South Kona is now open Sundays from 9:30 to noon for free self-tours during the pandemic. So, do you work with your friends down south?
Cool. Amy Greenwell is a spectacular, spectacular place. Jen's worked with them for so many years. And I recently got in contact with Mr. Hester, and we've been exchanging information on how to better take care of the uhi uhi trees. They're growing some. And man, if you ever get a chance to go down there and check it out, it's such a botanically rich area. They have specimen plants of almost everything that you could ever imagine from the dry forest or what have you. So definitely go check that place out. And I got to go there, I guess it was a little over a year ago, maybe getting close to 2 years ago, but a koa tree had fallen down. And so I went to help clean that up and get it off of the trails and it was a safety hazard. So we were able to cut it up, and then I think someone actually took the wood home for use.
Awesome. Yeah, and Hannah brought up a couple of times where these magnificent trees that you just hate to see them not growing, but for whatever reason, through storms or other things or pests, fell down, and then they were used, right? So, what's your take on using these kinds of trees that fall down versus just leaving them there?
Both things have their benefits. You want the nutrients and stuff to return to the soil, but for so many people that have had family connections to these species for so long, and the trees, they're just not there for people to collect on any kind of regular basis. So as much as we can, it makes our project happy to see those fallen trees kind of get to put to use, and for people to make use of them. And I think it's definitely see the value of it, especially if it's shared with other people, so that people can learn about what everything was happening with these plants and how they were interconnected into everyday life.
Oh, for sure. There's definitely an educational value there. I know one talking piece in my house is at last year's silent auction, I won a bottle opener with a Wiliwili handle.
Yeah, all right.
So that's a good, way to talk about it and talk about what you folks are doing, and just remember those trees.
Yeah, exactly. And if we can get it out into the world, and in your case, that was made by me, so.
Hey, all right, man. It works really well.
Getting people to be able to recognize Wiliwili wood and see its value, all the better.
Nice. And on that topic, Emily dropped in the chat that she was very happy to pick up a Wiliwili tree yesterday. Loved all that they learned yesterday, and especially talking story with you, brother.
All right. Yeah, sounds good. And yeah, there's plenty more Wiliwili to give away in the native plant giveaway, so come check us out.
All right, head on down, folks. So, Rob, I'm going to let you go get back out there into the field, man. Appreciate you spending the time with us. We are going to take a break. Hannah just popped into the chat. So the trees that she told the story about, those were managed harvests with permission, because in that case, the fountain grass and the other invasives were too thick to allow for that kind of nutrient recycling that you talked about, Rob.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I guess the fountain grass and lantana is just going to soak up all those nutrients. And, if it can go to good use, then why not? All the better, I think.
Oh, absolutely. Well, mahalo to you, Rob. We are going to take a break of an hour. We want to allow everyone to get some lunch, check out our exhibitors. We got lots of great exhibition booths in the Hoover website and the Hoover app. Go and check those out. Lots of folks doing really important, good work. We also want to encourage everyone to check out that silent auction. It ends in 6 hours. So go beat me in the auction, guys. There's some really great stuff in there, and support the wonderful work that Rob and Jen and the whole team and all the volunteers, everyone's doing. And know that when you support one reforestation project, you are supporting all of the reforestation projects because they're all working together so well, sharing research, sharing discoveries, things like that. So if you support any reforestation project in Hawaii, you're supporting all of the reforestation projects in Hawaii. So today, support the Waikoloa Dry Forest Initiative. Great silent auction items, as well as the live silent auction items over at the Dusty Donkey today. We want to again thank all of our sponsors for this year's Wiliwili Festival, 10th annual festival, first time virtual, Waikoloa Plaza, Hawaii Forest and Trail, Hawaii Water Service, the Waikoloa Foundation, Hawaiian Ethos, Hilton Waikoloa Village, NG Hawaii, Forest Solutions, and First Hawaiian Bank. Mahalo, mahalo, mahalo to all of you. To all of our presenters so far, just today we've had some amazing talk story time with Auntie Hannah Kihalani Springer, with Willie Rice working on the Pelikane dryland restoration. Certainly seeing our brother Rob again, always a joy. When we come back at 1 o'clock, we're going to announce some contest winners. We have a keiki activity, a fruit lab, and at 1:30, we're going to have an ulu cooking demonstration with Donna Shapiro, Chef Kealoha Domingo, a good brother, and Tom Menezes from the Hawaii Ulu Co-op and other affiliated organizations. Join us. We'll be back at 1. And until then, go check out the exhibitor booths, check out the silent auction, have some lunch, take a walk in the yard, figure out where you're going to plant your Wiliwili tree, and we'll see you back here in an hour. Aloha.